Choose your destiny. Flawless victory.
What's going on, guys? LordKing here again, back with another UFC preview show, UFC Fight Night more specifically. This isn't going to be the longest video, and I've also left it a little bit late to do it considering the event is tomorrow, simply because there is one fight on this card which everyone's looking forward to, which is Lewis versus Hunt. Now this fight is going to be explosive, to say the least. Both fighters are incredibly powerful sort of fighters, but I'll give a bit more of an overview into it when we get to that. It is in Auckland, New Zealand, so if anyone is watching this, obviously the time difference, as I'm sure you all know, New Zealand, that Australia sort of time difference, they are ahead of us. Let's look into the actual card itself. Again, as I mentioned, the card isn't the most stacked, but what normally happens with these sort of cards are the matchups make themselves. So they kind of make the fights actually themselves, where these people are so well matched up. These cards are normally actually better than the even bigger cards because the names aren't as big. So these people tend to perform a lot better, and the fights are actually genuinely, normally a lot better than they are. So let's look at some of the fighters that we have on here. We obviously have Derek Brunson, which is very explosive. Obviously Lewis and Hunt both going at it. Ross Pearson is another good one. Just people like De Silva. Or Tim Elliott as well. The fighters on this card have the sort of potential here, and especially with the matchmaking, they will have the potential to cause some very, very explosive and very entertaining sort of fights. So look out for this fight night for being one of the better cards of the year, as it could well be. I'm not going to put a prediction on that, but it could well be one of the more entertaining ones of the year, with a heavy amount of knockouts just by looking at all the people on this sort of card in general. Let's look actually more specifically into Mark Hunt versus Derek Lewis. This is the only fight I'm going to be covering, so this should be a shorter video, simply because I think it's the only fight that actually needs to be covered. Looking into it now, KOs, it speaks for itself. 89% versus 75% KO TKO percentages. It's unbelievable. Subs, we don't even need to look at that. Decisions, 25% for Mark Hunt is pretty negligible. These sort of things they're not massive. they're KO artists. These guys punch, and they're heavy punches. That's all we need to know, really. Derek Lewis, he does have that 79-inch reach compared to Mark Hunt's 72-inch reach. Now, in these sort of terms, it is incredibly useful thing to have that sort of advantage over your opponent, especially when you are going to be pretty much boxing the whole time. I don't expect either of these two to wrestle, although Derek Lewis could maybe go for a takedown. I doubt he will. I think he wants to prove himself as probably the hardest hitter in this division. So I think he's going to try and trade and put that sort of KO TKO on Mark Hunt. But again, the reach does assist that incredibly. It is a very, very useful thing to have. Significant strikes, we have again both very, very similar sort of things. 3-ish per person significant strikes landed per minute, which is a great sort of thing to have. Accuracy, again, relatively similar. Absorbed, Mark Hunt does tend to absorb a bit more. He is known for having a crazy chin, as you'll see in a video a little bit later. Defense, again, incredibly similar. Now, the stat that I think will have the least sort of play this weekend's card is the grappling. Again, it may do. Mark Hunt may try and switch it up and be smart about it and go for the grappling and takedowns and things, but I doubt it. These stats are pretty irrelevant, to be honest. I don't really think we need to look at them actually that much. 0.7 to 1.5 takedown, I think they're very negligible sort of amounts, and we don't really need to look into them too specifically. I would be quite shocked if one of them were to go for a takedown, but again, we can never ever rule anything out. Looking at each fighter's record, Alistair Overeem, Brock Lesnar, Frank Mir, Antonio Silva, Stipe Miocic, Verdum. Long story short, Mark Hunt, I've given him the credit of doing his record first, has fought absolutely everyone and anyone. This gentleman is a former K1 champion, making him one of the most lethal kickboxing strikers of all time. And as you can see, he obviously has some pretty big losses on his career. Obviously the one after Alistair Overeem previously, a bad TKO, but he's fought everyone. He is a veteran in the game. Now on to Derek Lewis, an upcoming riser. Travis Brown, Abdurrahimov, Roy Nelson, Gonzaga, Grabowski, Jordan. Again, his UFC career is pretty young at the moment, and his most recent win with obviously the Travis Brown sort of thing is he's a rising star, and as you'll see soon enough, the sort of things that he can do is he has a hell of a lot of potential, and his record is a very, very good record for the people he's fought and all of that at the moment. So let's look into their strengths. And again, there's not really too much to cover in this, unfortunately. I know you're maybe looking for a little bit more of an in-depth thing. Power, it's obvious. Derek Lewis has incredible power, and he's actually surprisingly fast and relatively agile. Sometimes you'll see him doing some crazy sort of kicks, and actually he has some surprisingly really good high kicks, actually. He says it's one of his favourite moves to do, but this is all going to be about the power sort of aspect of it. As you can see in the background now, we have a clip of him KOing Travis Brown. I will reserve my thoughts of Travis Brown, the person himself, but this was a great fight, and now you also get to see Mario Yamasaki's awful stoppage and why I think he is the worst ref in MMA. But again, as I mentioned, the speed and agility, it could play a big factor into this, along with Derek Lewis's reach. That speed and agility may give him the edge over Mark Hunt, who is a little bit slower now in his older sort of age. Mark Hunt's strength, power, again, it's undoubtable. His power is absolutely phenomenal. Kickboxing, as I mentioned before, he's a former K1 champion. Now, for anyone who's unaware, these are the K1 Champions is probably the biggest and best kickboxing organization there ever was. If you were the K1 Grand Prix champion, then you were probably the baddest man on the planet at the time in terms of striking, and he was a former champion of that. Timing and patterns, he sets his things up incredibly well. As you'll see on the next clip against Frank Mir, he sets up his uppercuts incredibly well. He baits people into doing things, and then he times off these things and builds patterns off them, and he does it incredibly well. It's something that it's his experience, again, mentioning he is a former K1 champion, it's his experience that he has learned and managed to do this and build this sort of repertoire, this muscle memory up over the years. And again, yeah, he's worked on it and he's earned his credentials for doing it. Bam, there it is. Those flinches he's made Frank Mir do before are all set up for him to walk in slowly and then basically lull his opponent to doing these flinches and feints, and then he eventually hits them with something which he comes very quickly. Now, what is actually next for each fighter, this is still yet to be determined. Derek Lewis he has put the picket signs out, and he has campaigned numerous times now. He wants Francis Ngannou, the next sort of big thing that's coming. The other big heavyweight that's coming up in this division is him and Francis Ngannou are the two big sort of timers, the big hitters who are just knocking everyone out with ease. So he said he wants to put an end to his train and possibly get a fight with him next. Derek Lewis, he's one of my favourite sort of fighters in the thing. He is absolutely hilarious. If you watch some of his interviews with anyone, whoever it is, he's an incredibly funny guy and he takes things very lightheartedly. Now, Mark Hunt, should he win next? Well, I'm hoping he hopefully can get a win, mainly because I see this as almost his last sort of legs in this MMA career. Again, the last loss to Alistair Overeem was an incredibly bad one, and a bad TKO, and considering Overeem was also pretty ill for that fight as well. Mark Hunt's also had some relatively big problems with the UFC, saying he wants to sue the UFC and whatnot because of all these things where people with steroids are fighting and stuff like that, and he hasn't been told about people with steroids who are fighting. So some big things happening. So I feel if he doesn't win this, there's a possibility he could get cut regardless of his record. So I'm hoping he doesn't, but Mark Hunt probably needs this as a win to boost his career back up. Now, as I mentioned, this will be a relatively short sort of preview, simply because this is the main fight that needs covering. Obviously, as I mentioned, Derek Brunson and Kelly fighting us, things like that. Ross Pearson on the card as well. But again, this is the fight, and the reason this fight night is happening is because of these two gentlemen. Especially the reason why it's in Auckland, New Zealand, is because of Mark Hunt. So it's the only one I thought was fitting to cover. Now, what I thought I'd leave you with is, as I did in my previous the Max Holloway preview, is I put in a clip of him doing one of the coolest things. I said one of the coolest things I've seen in MMA. Now, this clip I put in a Mark Hunt to finish the video and just end on out with even with some sound. This is one of the coolest clips I've seen of Mark Hunt in kickboxing. This kind of sums up the sort of character that Mark Hunt is, and it's incredible. A lot of people have said a lot of good things about Mark Hunt. He's meant to be a very legitimate sort of person. His things like apparently his autobiography and things are incredibly heartwarming and stuff like that as well. So he seems like a very legit person who is incredibly good at kickboxing as well. So take a look at this clip. As always, guys, thank you very much for watching my videos. I've been Lord King. Please like, share, and subscribe. It means the world to me. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
勇者ですよね、マーク・ハントってやっぱすごいな。勇敢なファイターです、マーク・ハント。顔で受けてますね。左ノックダブル。よく倒れませんね。